Today we're going to look at some comics by a fairly well-known website called Everyday Feminism. Why am I reviewing such a limited group of art? I don't know. I just like to put things into groups, I guess. Also, before anything else, I want to make it abundantly clear that I don't care about the politics of this whatsoever. I'm not going to mention the political messages of these comics, I'm only judging the quality of the artwork and nothing more. You can make your own conclusions about what is in the comics, I don't care. I chose to review some comics from Everyday Feminism because I heard the art was truly something to behold. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of them, I'm just going to give my thoughts on the ones I found the most interesting. The format of this review is going to be a little different. I think I'm going to go from panel to panel, giving my thoughts and commentary, and I'll probably end with some sort of summary at the end of each comic. So let's begin with one of their most recent comics called The Misadventures of Light-Skinned Lexi. Yep, this is it. Just breathe it in. So I don't really know where to begin, to be honest. I guess we'll start with the fact that our main character's eyeballs are in their hair. I'm going to assume this is a stylistic thing, but even then, it just seems like a poor choice for a character design. In all honesty, it just makes them look like a fish. In fact, there is a chance this entire comic was drawn badly on purpose as some sort of lazy art style. And if that was their intention, then I guess they accomplished what they were going for. But if this is not intentional, then let us continue with the review. So you'll notice in the first couple of panels that the line work and coloring is especially terrible. In a lot of places, the coloring either goes outside of the lines or doesn't fill up the object that is supposed to be colored. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that most children learn in elementary school. Consistent human anatomy is pretty much non-existent. Even the borders of the panels themselves are crooked. Then in the next 3 panels we are greeted with a neon blue sky, along with some perspective issues I cannot even begin to identify. The shading of these characters is also really weird. For some reason these 2 characters have shading but this one doesn't, and then later the shading doesn't even correspond with the lighting. At this point it just looks like they gave up and decided to put shading wherever they felt like it. Man, that is one glorious arm, I'll tell you what, mate. I love it when my arms are noodles with inconsistent thickness. Overall, this comic is just a disaster. It's pretty much a rejection of every single fundamental of art there is. It's so bad that instead of bringing visual life to the narrative, it seems to suck the life out of it. This next comic has significantly better art in the line work and figure department, but when it comes to the choice of colors and texture elements, it's pretty hard to look at. I don't think really bright purple was the best choice for skin color, especially when it's paired with what I can only assume are halftones. The whole effect just kind of messes with your eyes. I'm not saying to change the color, just the saturation should be lowered. I wouldn't be bothered that much by this if the rest of the comic didn't feature these 2 people exclusively for the rest of the panels. Again, this comic is fine overall. It's obvious there's some integrity with the way objects and figures are drawn. It's just, some of the choices can be strange. This next comic also has passable artwork. The watercolor aesthetic works for the most part. For the first couple of panels, we are greeted with babies with heads that look like footballs. The choice of colors is pretty decent and diverse. The anatomy in some panels can look a little odd. In this panel, the character's head doesn't look like it lines up with the body, and I can't really tell what's going on with the officer's right arm in this panel. I do wish there was a little less white spots. It's pretty obvious from the first few panels that the artist is capable of covering those up, so I wish there was a little more attention in those areas. Overall, it's a pretty nice looking comic. There's the weird detail here and there, but it's still pleasant to look at. This next comic is pretty plain, full of solid colors, average line work. The thing about this comic is how flaws don't really jump out at you, but when you really look at it, you find a bunch of bizarre details. Some things just don't look finished. This doesn't feel like a finished comic. Take the second panel, for example. You will notice that the character's hair has been deleted, I suppose. She clearly has hair in the other panels, so it's pretty weird to see this cut up forehead. There's also several places where the line work peeks out of the panel borders. It's these little things that irk me. I get that it's really small and kind of nitpicky, but these are the things that if they were simply erased or cleaned up, the comic would look a lot better. The comic is average. It's got a good understanding of figures, anatomy, and a cohesive look, but again, it just seems unfinished. This comic comic contains a more simplified style. The first panel shows some characters, and for the rest of the comic, this is pretty much how everyone is drawn. The thing that stands out to me is the lack of consistency for the line work and other elements. For some reason, the hair outline is significantly thinner than the body outline. To me, this creates a distracting effect. I feel like having thinner line work throughout the whole comic would work better. The reason I say thinner is because when you have really thick lines for things like hands, it gets pretty cluttered. But then in the next panel, the line work for the right character's hand gets really thin all of a sudden. This is what I mean by consistency. You can't just change things like this whenever you feel like it. This comic is littered with all kinds of things like this. In this panel, the line work for the cop's hat gets blurry, and below this you have an unfinished outline for the car. It just looks bad. On top of this, the characters have all sorts of unsightly proportions and lazy anatomy. Some of the figures look better than most, but at times they seem stiff and distorted. I get that it's supposed to be simple, but there should be some sort of fluidity and liveliness to them that separates them from your average stick figure. This comic suffers a lot from its lack of consistency. There's just a lot of out-of-place elements that are incredibly distracting. The comics on this website seem to range from slightly above average to mediocre. There's a bunch of details and consistency issues that really drag the quality down. I guess their main focus is on their political messages, but even then they should look nice. I mean, if the art isn't visually satisfying, then what is the point of making it a comic in the first place? Anyway, I guess that's enough of these comics for today. My name is Solar Sands, and goodbye.